Courtney here with Smitty's Fly Box. We're just going over September's tying box for the intermediate tying box. We're going to be going over the Conehead Wooly Sculpin. Super popular pattern if you're familiar with Kelly Galloop and his streamer patterns that he does with deer hair. This is one of his. It's a very effective small streamer pattern, which I love. I love fishing smaller streamers the majority of the time on the waters that I fish, and this fly is super effective. I put a few wraps of lead up under the cone there. I did about 6 or 7 wraps, pushed them up and under the cone. I do that more so the cone holds in place, not so much for the weight, but I do it so that cone will hold. And you'll see as we get the deer hair up here, it allows so there's not a big dead space underneath the cone here. One thing I will do with the cone though is I'll add a drop of super glue just underneath the cone there, just to kind of hold it in place. So I'll just slip that out of my vise here and just add a little drop of glue. You just want to be careful you don't get too much, as it can come out through the eye or out at the top of the cone and into the eye of the hook. You don't want to gum up the eye of your hook there. Okay, then the first step we're going to do, basically we're just going to be building making a woolly bugger here. So I've got some marabou, and I want that to be the length of the hook shank. So the tips, I hold that just for measurement. The tips of the marabou will just go to the bend of the hook or just a little beyond, which is fine. And then I'll go ahead and tie that down. And I like to tie this down right on top of the hook shank, the whole feather here. So it just creates a nice even profile for my body. So I'm gonna stop short of the cone though, so I don't end up wrapping up into here where my deer hair is going to be. We got to have a stopping point. You want your materials all to have one stopping point, because what we're going to do is we're going to add our deer hair up here into the collar of the fly, and you don't want a bunch of marabou or chenille up in here. That'll mess up the deer hair as we go to spin it and stack it onto the hook. Okay, the next step we're going to do, just like any old woolly bugger, we're just going to be adding some flash to the tail. So here for this one we have gold flashabou. I really like this color combination of this ginger and this light brown that you'll see as we go. So I just fold a strand of flashabou in half and tie it into the side here. Trim it so it's even with the tail. And then just repeat on the opposite side. I just try to make sure that they're even right on the side of each side of the hook. Okay, then we're going to add a piece of copper wire. This is strictly just to help the durability of the strung hackle feather that we'll tie in here. Just add that, tie that down to the side of the hook, and then we'll add our chenille. So this chenille color I'm using is a speckled chenille. I really like this color combination. It's got that ginger color in it with that light brown in it as well. Adds a really good variegated look to this fly. I kind of think it looks like a brown trout, even though it's more of a sculpin pattern, but it gives that look of a young juvenile brown trout as well. And we'll just wrap up here to our stopping point. I'm just going to advance our chenille forward, just one wrap right in front of the other. Just make sure that you're not making any gaps in that. You could add glue here as well. That'll help just so that body doesn't twist around. Okay, so I'll come right up here to my thread where that is my stopping point. I'm going to bring my bobbin up and under and tie down this chenille. We'll go ahead and trim off the excess we have. Okay, now we're ready for our strung hackle. So I've already prepared this feather. I've just taken one feather. I've cut the bottom fluffy feathers off, the fibers off there. We're going to tie this in by the bottom of the feather here. And then we'll just start doing our wraps back. I like to do one full turn right in front. You want to make sure that those feathers are laying back, not facing forward. That will cause you stress looking at the fly when your hackle feathers are pointing forward. So make sure they're pointing back if you need to. So you just need to turn your feather so those hackle barbs point back. So I'm going to wrap back to the back of my fly here just before the tail, and then I'll bring my hackle, or hold my hackle in my left hand and bring that wire up and through, and I just wiggle that through, trying not to trap down many hackle fibers as I go. And tie down your wire and make sure you trim out that back piece there so you don't have a big long rooster tail sticking out the back. Okay, from here I just like to pull everything back, tying it down so it's all facing back nice and pretty like that. If your hackle's kind of matty, you could take a comb and brush it out as you need. Okay, so we've basically made a woolly bugger with a big dead space behind the cone there. So now we're going to fill that area in with our deer hair, and this is really what makes this fly unique, and I think just makes a really cool profile on this fly. So the next step, you're going to need a few tools. You're going to want a comb, something to comb out under fur of the deer hair. You're going to want a good sharp pair of scissors, and you're going to want a hair stacker. Okay, so if you've never used a hair stacker before, a nice solid brass one like this really helps get that hair nice and even. Okay, so I've cut a clump of deer hair and I'm holding it in my left hand by the tips. Okay, I'm just going to take my comb, I'm just going to brush this out off camera here. So what I'm doing is I'm just brushing out all the under fur. So you don't want anything that's going to hinder the flare of this deer hair as you tie it down. Okay, and so for this first section, we're just creating a collar is all we're doing here. Okay, so I have my tips. I'm going to put them into my hair stacker. You want to make sure the tips go in first. So that's the tapered ends of this deer hair. You're going to put that into your hair stacker. Lightly tap that against the table or on your hand. Now when I'm working with deer hair, I like to always have the tips facing the way they're going to be tied in. So I'll pull those out, pull that top portion of the hair stacker out. I have my tips nice and even. I'll just gently grab these with my left hand. I'm going to hold them there. I'll just kind of pick through any of the loose ones that didn't quite get in my hand here. I transfer it to my right hand for a measurement. Okay, so I want that deer hair to go about halfway back of the on the chenille that we just tied in. Okay, so then I'll bring it back to my left hand. You'll see you'll lose a few here and there, that's fine. And I'm just going to take my scissors and I'm just going to cut a straight edge on this deer hair. Okay, get that straggler out of there. So then I position my deer hair where my thread is hanging, and I'm going to do a loose wrap up and over. And then as I come around, I start to get tighter, and then I really crank down on that second wrap, third wrap. So here we're not spinning the deer hair. We're not allowing it to go around the hook shank at all. We want just a nice, big, pretty collar like that. So the idea with the collar is you want it on the top, obviously, of your fly, and then coming down onto the sides. You don't want it to come underneath the fly at all. This is acting as the gill pack for the sculpin. Okay, so you can take your thumb and kind of flatten that out and kind of help roll it along as you need. I'm just going to come in here and add a few more wraps. And if you see some that go down along under the bottom, it's not a huge deal. You can reposition it as you need and move it however you feel you need to. Okay, so we have our collar set. So now all we're going to do, I just added a couple more wraps there just to hold that down really tight. What you don't want is to turn on this and have that deer hair spin on you. So that's what you want to avoid. Okay, so next we're ready to add in the rest of our collar here. This is where we will do a spin on the deer hair. So I'm going to take out another clump of deer here. And I'm not going to worry about stacking this or packing it in the hair stacker, because I'm not worried if the tips are even or not. My tips that I wanted even are that collar. I am going to comb it out. And on this one, I will cut the tips off of this clump here. So I have a nice clump that just looks like this here. It's kind of, you just have to play with this a little bit to figure out how much deer hair you want to pack in here. You don't need anything super tight. We're not trying to make this thing float, so just a nice size clump like that that'll fill in this cone, or fill in this gap behind the cone here. So I'm going to put that right on top of the hook, and all I'm going to do is do a loose wrap, come down around, do one more. I'm going to tighten it. Then that third wrap, I like to let it start to spin. So it should only rotate once. That means your deer head are set, we're ready to go. And then from here we can start to trim it. And we can advance our thread up and through here. So really when you tug on it again, that deer hair shouldn't spin again. So now we can go ahead and advance our thread behind our cone, and then we can whip finish it, and then we can start to do the trimming. And as I whip finish, I just want to try to make sure that I'm not catching any deer hair and trapping it down. I want to try to keep that standing out as much as I can so we can trim it. Okay, so here comes the fun part. You can really shape this however you want, whatever you feel like you want it to look like. With these, I like to just come in with scissors or a razor blade. A flexible razor blade works really well here. I'll just show you with the scissors here. This is where a good sharp pair of scissors comes in. I like to just follow the taper of that cone. Just come back. I'm just gonna follow that taper all around the cone here. And remember, I didn't pack this in super tight, so I'm not looking for a super tight packed collar of deer hair like you would see on like a bass bug or anything like that. So I'm not too okay, so that's basically it from that point there. That one's ready to fish and good to go. Continue to clean this up as much as you want, make it look how you want, but that's it for the Conehead Wooly Sculpin. So let us know how you guys do with this fly. If you have any questions, leave us a comment here on our YouTube page. Be sure to subscribe and check out our website for our subscription boxes, and you'll continue to get the materials and stuff to make these awesome patterns that we do, that we fish with, and love to use. So good luck, and